That's right, folks. Another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Today, we're here to break down some NFL playoff overreactions. Is Romeo Doubs the new RB wide receiver one for the Packers? Is Chris Godwin done for fantasy football? Is Rashee Rice a top 24 pick next season? Breaking down all this and more on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast, starting right now.
What up, Razzballers? Welcome back to another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football YouTube show and podcast on the back end side. Another Tuesday 4-pack. We got the quad box here for you, joined by my man Derek Favret. That's Derek__ Favret. Matty Styles in the bottom corner there. We got Styles 08 in the Boston Charge. Bobby Lamarco, Bobby Lamarco. I am your co-pilot this evening. My name is Sky Guasco on the X Machine. You can find everything Razzball NFL. Of course, we do have the podcast side as well for those of you not listening in real time, or you're welcome to double back. I'm always constantly on the move, so the podcast is my preferred way to catch up on everything Razzball. But those of you on the YouTube show, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell and make sure you don't miss any of our numerous shows throughout the playoffs and the off season. The four of us will be with you. Playoffs. We'll be with you for the rest of the off season. We're going to be recapping much of what happened in 2023, turning the page to 2024. Coming up in March, we do have free agency. And then, of course, we have the draft in April. And then we're going to get right back into draft season, come up early and mid-summer. Tonight, though, we're going to have some playoffs. Overreactions. It's really easy to watch these games. Every game at this point, folks, is nationally televised. So every game this week, everybody's watching. They have their own primetime slot. We all watch all of them. It's really easy to catch some of these highlights, big reels, or having players disappear, frankly, and overreact to them in the grand scheme versus comparing them to the rest of the season to see if it's an outlier performance or if maybe this is just a continuation and something to be concerned or excited about heading into 2024. So we got a couple names for you each. We're going to go around the horn per usual. Once again, everybody feel free to jump in the chat. Let us know some of your possible overreactions. Who's maybe a player that you are very excited about based on their playoff performance so far in NFL terms, excited about next year in fantasy? Or on the other side, who's a player that you're maybe concerned about because they haven't been developing the way that you expected them to? Maybe it's cost their team overall, or maybe it's just kind of a glitch in the system and they'll bounce back when healthy or whatnot. Gentlemen, good evening. Very excited to get back on a quad box here. We don't have our Sunday morning shows anymore, which really bothers me because I look forward to that all week long. We do it 17 times, and then it just drops off the map until next September. So, miss you boys. Great to be back on another quad box. Any opening thoughts? We'll go around the horn quickly. What is one thing that popped off, positive or negative? Derek, I'll start with you. We'll go to Styles and then the boss. What is just one thing, NFL terms, fantasy terms, that just popped off the page this weekend in football? Derek, good evening.
Wide right up in Buffalo.
Oh, boy. Yikes. Just right for the heart. Jeez.
Wide right. So, yeah, I mean, growing up in New York anyway, for the 4 years they went to the Super Bowl, just to see that kind of come back and peeling the Band-Aid off of that, those years, it's disappointing. It would have been nice to see Buffalo and Baltimore this weekend, but it is what it is.
I saw a meme today going around Instagram that was the Bills dealt with Tom Brady for 20 years only to see Patrick Mahomes right after him. It's a pretty brutal 30-year stretch for Bills Mafia. So shouts out to our boy Bucky and the rest of the fam up in upstate New York. Styles, how about you, bud?
Outside of kickers mattering, I think that the number of the seed, it clearly does not matter.
Fair.
I don't think home field matters, even though it's proven to have mattered a little bit. I don't think that home field matters, and I don't think the higher seed matters necessarily. Now, maybe when you get down.
freeze on us?
Oh, is he frozen? I was like, am I
Yeah.
frozen?
Sorry, Maddie, you froze on us a little bit. Finish your thought there, please.
No, I don't care. I'm done. The Packers lost. I don't have anything to talk about.
Fair enough.
Bright future,
Bob?
though, Matt. I mean, come on. You got to be – you, honestly, Packers fans, come on, dude. This is the third quarterback in a row you hit on. Like, I mean, you guys had – this is the
Plus
best –
Matt Flynn.
Matt Flynn, by the way. You just throw him in week 18 every year, and you're set. You just have
Yeah,
every other quarterbacks we do 17. You're good to go.
Yeah, plenty.
Yeah, it's good. I would say this. I think the Buffalo Bills. I think the problem when I watch them is like they're just. It's always just one thing. It's like Josh Allen did not check it down. The guy was running across the middle of the field. I get it. He was shooting for the end zone, trying to score there. Whatever, that's fine. Stephon Diggs misses a perfectly thrown ball down the sideline. He drops it, and then the missed kick. It just like the Chiefs, but. The one thing I will say, though, is like Travis Kelce returned to form and Rashee Rice emerged as a legit wide receiver 1. However, the clock is ticking on Travis Kelce. Like we saw early on in the year, Kelce wasn't a number 1 option all year, dominant, and the Chiefs struggled. Like Kelce's going to age out of dominance. And who's going to – is Noah Gray the next guy? Is he's come right in? If he's not as good as Travis Kelce – there will be an opportunity for the Bills to take over in the next 2 to maybe 3 years because if you look at the skill position group for the Bills, I mean, yeah, Diggs is 30, but at the same time, like they do have a window with Josh Allen still. So I get it. It sucks, but it took Travis Kelce returning to form and Rashee Rice to basically be that alpha 1 receiver option for them to kind of emerge and beat the Bills by a freaking missed field goal. So I think Bills fans – you're going to be fine. I honestly am interested to see what happens with Stephon Diggs. Like, where would you go? If you're Stephon Diggs, where's a better place in the NFL right now that the Bills are willing to trade you to? Does anybody have any – I know we talked – actually, no, we talked about this previously, the Cowboys, right? That's the one we liked a lot. Go back with his brother. I think Derek called that out. But, yeah, I think Bills – I think it's a little bit of an overreaction here to the Bills losing to the Chiefs by a missed field goal.
Yeah, I will tell you that since I do get to say something, if you're the Packers or you're the Bills or you're the team that's in their position next year, you cannot stop scoring. You cannot play to just not lose the game. Green Bay had that football game was over. The Buffalo Kansas City game was over. All they had to do was do what they were supposed to do, and they go home with a win. And both of them just shit the bed. Now, Jordan Love will be fine. He can't make those mistakes sitting on the bench. So the same things we loved about Brett Favre and hated about Brett Favre, we're going to love and hate about Jordan Love. So I think Green Bay is going to be fine. But Buffalo needs to learn a lesson. They should have put up 50. Foot on the gas, don't stop. Josh Allen could have run for 4 touchdowns. He didn't have to throw the ball. Just keep scoring points, or somebody like the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, Patrick Mahomes, they're going to come back and beat you if you just let them hang around.
Check it down, dude. And like the thing with Josh Allen, I would just show him the tape. Like, just take the 5-yard throw and like get the first down. Like, it's okay. It's okay to just get first downs and move the ball, period. Like, it just seems like he's swinging for the fences every time. I don't know. I think I think you're right, though. I think the hierarchy of the NFL is still there. I think the Ravens could burst everyone's bubble and beat Patrick Mahomes, but that'll be tough even at home. But I think the 49ers are going to be – that's another one too, man. That team is going to be – they're not going anywhere for a while too. So that's – but we thought the same thing about the Eagles last year, and they fell down. So, who knows? But, Sky, what's your thoughts about the weekend?
Yeah, for me, it's really the upstarters. I'm not sure it's an overreaction per se, but just a reaction in general. Packers are one of them, absolutely. Very impressed with Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers. We're going to talk about a couple of those guys. But also, like, are the Browns actually better with Deshaun Watson next year? I don't know that they are. Nick Chubb may or may not come back. What do the Browns look like? They surprised everybody this year, played very well down the stretch. Do the Steelers take another step forward? Do they clean things up and get back to Steeler football? And the Texans, look, very young team, rookie quarterback, rookie head coach, but they impressed everybody, winning a playoff game and then just running into a buzzsaw last week. But they look very, very ripe for longevity in the NFL potentially as well. And they might bring in a big running back or something like that. So there's a lot of teams who maybe, were disappointed obviously in the outcome. But the reality is with all sports, if your team doesn't win the championship, it's a disappointing season no matter what. But when you're in a certain point of your team's building and rebuilding and things like that, there are definitely positives to take from it. I think it's more disastrous when your team is expected to do big things, Dallas, and you don't. Versus these other teams, Houston, Pittsburgh, even Cleveland, Green Bay, if you want to, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, teams who really, I think, surpassed expectations from everybody but themselves in the locker room, and they have a bright future. So excited to see what happens with a lot of these younger teams, because obviously we have the old guard, right? Burrow and the Bengals will be back, I'm sure. Some of these, teams fell out a little bit. The Eagles, I think, bounce back next year. Dallas will be in the mix at some level. But I do think there's a lot of young bucks, and what happens with the Rams, because they got booted too, but they're an older version of that type of team. So we'll see what happens. Nonetheless, we got a lot to cover tonight.
One thing too, though.
Yeah.
Like the Jags last year were the upstart team, right? Like they got into the playoffs, they win a game. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, Trevor Lawrence, they're here. And then they don't make the playoffs, and they actually get beat out by a team that has a rookie head coach or a rookie quarterback. So things could change very quick. Because I thought the Jags were like the next team to compete with the Chiefs, and in reality, they were not even making the playoffs. So that's crazy.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens, man. A lot can, Calvin Ridley's going to move, I'm sure, and is Trevor Lawrence all of what we thought was going to be. But those are conversations for another time. Let's get into our overreaction players. So we have a couple that we've picked out each. Derek, I'm going to kick it off with you first. We just talked about the Buccaneers, right? They had, I think, a much better season than everybody except for Matt Styles expected them to have, right? Let's make sure that we give the man his flowers, as the kids say. Matty Styles accidentally picked Baker Mayfield being a top 12 quarterback, and sure enough, we're going to give it to him. Not only that, but he's gotten better in the playoffs. And I have to say, like Baker or not, dude's a gamer. And there are certain players in all sports who are just vibes players. You know what I mean? Like when the vibes are right, they just play better, period, talent or not. Baker feels good in Tampa. He's respected in Tampa. The players love him. He loves them. Todd Bowles lets him go, and he's playing out of his mind right now. So Baker and the Bucks surprised everybody. But maybe there's a couple question marks there. Derek, do you have any concerns with the Bucks in general? Do they run it back with Mike Evans? How's Chris Godwin, the running game? What's going on in Tampa? What's one of your overreactions here?
Yeah, my first overreaction there is Chris Godwin. So let's looking back on his season. We'll get to the playoffs here in a minute, but looking back on his season, his ADP at draft time was 62, which put him at wide receiver 25, which is respectable. I would say, years past, he and Mike Evans were like 1 and 1A. Well, that obviously, even this year draft season, he was drafted as a, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 timeframe. So quick quiz, just off the cuff to the three of you. I'm going to give you a name and Chris Godwin, and you tell me which one going into next year is your favorite, or who should be a higher draft pick. Jaden Reed or Chris Godwin?
Reed.
Yeah, I would take Reed.
Okay. Garrett Wilson or Chris Godwin?
Wilson.
They're both number 2s. I'll go with Wilson, though.
Okay. Rashee Rice or Chris Godwin?
Not
Rice.
even close.
Rice.
Not even close.
Okay.
Rice.
Zay Flowers, Chris Godwin?
Flowers.
I think you got to go lower. I think you got to almost go a full 10 to 12 players lower. Those guys I feel like are a lot better.
Yeah. So that's that's a great point, Bobby, and you're making the point that I wanted to bring out. What all those names have in common is they were all within 6 fantasy points of each other, including Chris Godwin at the end of the season. Chris Godwin was wide receiver 28. So the wide receiver 25 ADP at the beginning of the year was pretty much dead on for him, even though it just felt like all these players that we just talked about and just his season just felt like he had a down year. But he was actually just about where the prognosticators had him at wide receiver 25. So, but we're looking to next year, and we look at the playoffs. Tampa won a game. They could have won a second game in Detroit. You would expect that someone other than Mike Evans would have shown up, right? So who would that have been? Chris Godwin. Well, no. 4 for 45 in the game against the Eagles, 4 for 40 against the Lions. He didn't show up. He's not a 1A. He's probably not necessarily a 1B anymore, or even a 2. Might be closer to a 3 now, even though his year-long stats are pretty decent. He's just not a gamer for fantasy, I think, anymore. And in fact, what I think the comp is now for him, and you guys tell me if I'm overreacting, Courtland Sutton. Chris Godwin is the new Courtland Sutton going into next year. What do you think?
I think Courtland Sutton's way better than Chris Godwin. Now, new quarterback in Denver, so we'll see what happens. But just apples to apples, I'd take Sutton all day long.
The reason I make that comp is, he's become a player this year more than anything. I mean, if you look at his stats across the year and compare him to those other wide receivers, he's relatively on par with receivers that we're high on. But, he, as far as his year-long stats, but, he had only one game over 20 fantasy points, 6 games under 10 fantasy points, which means, he has a baseline, but the days when we were receiving, games where he would spike like Mike Evans, we remember the day when we would have Mike Evans one week and then Chris Godwin the next week. Those days are over. And he's now become for fantasy more of a baseline player like Courtland Sutton was this year, which kind of puts him like wide receiver 3 in my book.
Here's a follow-up to Derek's question. Would you rather have Godwin in the late 5th, early 6th, or Trey Palmer in the late 9th, early 10th?
Ooh, TP is looking nice.
Yeah.
Listen, Baker I think we could see a Geno Smith-esque dip next year for Baker. Like, I just think that maybe some of this got him caught off guard. Maybe Dave Canales leaves. I don't know what the situation Tampa is. Maybe Mike Evans walks in free agency. That could change things here. But the problem with Godwin was he got you 10 points sometimes, but if you look at consistency, he was 42nd in wide receiver 3 or better performances. So he would only get 12 PPR points in 41% of his games. So that's not wide receiver 4 numbers for a player that we talk about a floor, but he wasn't consistent enough. And I think the other problem was I talked to this Baker, Mike Evans, clear. It was 1A, 1B for the longest time. And then this year, Baker Mayfield of all people decided Mike Evans is the guy. So I don't think Baker, if now we're talking about Trey Palmer, Cade Otton emerged, Rashad White, I'm just a little concerned that Baker's going to be good enough to support a wide receiver 1, maybe a wide receiver 3, a wide receiver 4, a tight end 1, and an RB 1. I just don't think that the offense is going to be that good. So I think if Evans doesn't walk and he comes back, I think Godwin is probably going to finish as a wide receiver 3 next year, which is fine. But I don't really like to do that in the 5th, 6th round. I'd rather take a shot on a guy that could finish as a top, 20 wide receiver personally. But I just wasn't excited about Godwin's season. A lot of high floor, the 10 to 12 range, but that's not going to win you anything.
Yep. I think he's Jamison Crowder at this point, which is good. And I think that those are the type of players where you need 10 to 15 PPR fantasy points every year at wide receiver 3 or your second flex. So those are great players to have because you just know you're getting that buoy with a little bit of a spike. If he accidentally scores, then he's a wide receiver 2, maybe wide receiver 1 per week. But I agree with Bob. I don't think the volume is going to be there for Tampa, unfortunately. And big, a huge part of that, and we'll see what happens at free agency. Some of these takes are going to be thrown out in the wash once free agency happens and the draft happens. But Mike Evans, my overreaction here, or non-overreaction, I guess you have to say, is that I just firmly believe this. I don't think it's an overreaction, and we've seen it before. But based on last year's ADP, he was an 8th round pick. I picked him in the 8th round, just being I'll get some depth, and if he happens to get back to half of what we want from Mike Evans with Baker Mayfield, maybe it'll be okay for my draft day capital. And here he is finishing wide receiver 7 in PPR. This is his 5th season of 12 plus touchdowns, not just 10, double digits, 12 plus touchdowns, fifth year out of 10, so 50% of the time, obviously, 12 plus touchdowns, just 79 receptions. You stack them up against all these other elite wide receivers, right? Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, whatever. And you just sort by receptions. And Mike Evans is all the way down the list, but it doesn't matter. His efficiency every year is like this. And you might think like, okay, well, just 80 receptions, man, he's got to bounce back. He's never had over 90. So like, it's not something that he's going to have over 100, 110, 115 receptions. He's just not that type of player. One thing that we said coming into the offseason with Baker Mayfield going to the Bucs is that one thing Baker does well and he likes to do is throw the ball down the field. And Mike Evans is the quintessential deep ball throw. Outside of Tyreek Hill, right? And I guess Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, if you want to count those guys in that mix. I don't think there's a better player one-on-one right now, 6'5", down the sideline than Mike Evans. And Baker Mayfield's going to get it up to him. Baker's coming back next year. Hopefully Mike Evans comes back. Baker's already kind of plotted for him to do so. We'll see if Mike wants to do that or chase the money. And he's been a top 12 wide receiver in 7 of 10 seasons. One of those years he got hurt that he wasn't, and the other 2 he was like 13 and 15. So he's right there. He's back in the mix for me. He was not in our top 24, so we're going to revisit that mock draft as we come in for those of you who've been paying attention. But for me, he's going to be a third-round pick, maybe with our pick, but in my drafts, probably a wide receiver 2 for me. And if he continues to have this touchdown upside, he can now be a wide receiver 1, drafted as a wide receiver 2, and sky's the limit weekly, as we know. Matt brought it up week after week after week after week. He is going to go for 202 twice over the season, and you're going to want him on your team, not your opponents at that point. So I think part of the Chris Godwin dip and just retaining, Chris Godwin's not terrible. He just has a ceiling that's lower than we want because Mike Evans is so dominant with Baker Mayfield. So Chris Godwin's leveling off a little bit. Mike Evans stays elite.
Take a wild guess, guys. How many targets did Evans have more than Godwin this year? Any guesses?
More than? I bet it was pretty close.
Maybe a dozen max.
I'd say less.
Correct. 6.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like that because one had 13 touchdowns, one had 2, and Evans had like 200 plus more yards, but like the targets were there. I'm actually going to look at that because that is really that's eye-opening.
That's an ADOT. That's an ADOT thing though, dude. You know that first of all, it's an ADOT and what?
Touchdowns aren't ADOT related, but I get yardage.
No.
Yes,
but yardage and opportunity. And Mike Evans had some big touchdowns because he can burn a dude, and he's a foot taller than most of these cornerbacks that he's playing. So like that matters, you know.
Well, here's a good stat. So Mike Evans had 20 end zone targets. So targets in the actual end zone. He converted those for 10 touchdowns. Godwin had 10 of those. He converted for 1 touchdown.
Yeah, 10%.
Those on average are 40%. 40% hit rate for those. So Godwin should have had closer to 4. Evans probably closer to 8. Still interesting.
Yeah, big opportunity there. So for me, it's just, I like Chris Godwin as a wide receiver 3 flex play. Mike Evans is going to be back up there, and I don't think he's going to fall past the 3rd round. If he's in the 4th, I'm taking him all day long. We'll see what happens there. And then Derek, I know that, you talked about fading Chris Godwin. We know Mike Evans bounced back in a big way. Matt called that this kind of Bucs resurgence early in the season. How do you feel about Baker Mayfield overall, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about Baker already, and 4,000 plus yards, 28 touchdowns, only 10 interceptions. And unfortunately, him more than anyone is going to remember the last one, more than these other ones through the season. But he left Cleveland. He was exiled from Cleveland. Went to Carolina, went to the Rams, and now to the Bucs. I mean, he was looking at journeymen, NFL journeymen at best. And what he put together, frankly, was a really good season. The Bucs made only an $8.5 million investment for the year, and they got triple that in value, I think. And fantasy owners the same. I mean, he essentially went undrafted probably in most leagues, and the savvy owner who picked him up early, got the payoff. So, good for him. Good for the Bucs. They found a quarterback. They can build the rest of their team or get some more weapons and They don't need to, chase the rookie quarterbacks in the draft, and at least for the next year or two. Good for him. I'm happy for him. He found a spot, and it looks like he's going to be the starter there for the next few years. And from what I'm hearing, the Bucks and Mike Evans, there's a camaraderie ship there that he wants to return, is what I'm hearing. So that bodes well for Baker next year, having Mike Evans back, if that's truly the case. And he's going to be probably if not a top 12 draftee, he's going to be shortly thereafter. So this year's going to pay off a lot more for him, of course, but for us in fantasy as well. We found a quarterback that we could at least plug and play at least moving forward. So good on Baker, good on the Bucks. They won a game in the playoffs, almost got a second one. I mean, he threw for almost 700 yards between the two games, 6 touchdowns. I mean, that speaks volumes.
Absolutely. And I think if Mike Evans leaves, Baker plummets. If he stays, they're in good shape. Matt, I'm going to turn to you here for a second. You can either, run half of your victory lap right now if you'd like to, or you can save it for our bold predictions and crazy calls recap show coming up here over the summer. But you did predict as a bold prediction, maybe even a crazy call, that Baker would be top 12. And he was just around that depending on formatting. You saw this ahead of time. The rest of us literally laughed you off the screen, but you stuck to your guns. How do you feel about this?
Still waiting for apologies. I'll continue to wait. I really, if I could just get one from Bob, you guys, the other two are off the hook.
Nice.
But we know Bob's never wrong. He won't admit it. So all I'll say is I agree. Mike Evans is big in Tampa in the community. He's loved by the fan base, does a lot of work in the community. So I think the best place for him is absolutely Tampa. Look at the fact that there's no state tax, right? So he can take a little bit of a pay cut if he wants to stay there and get more money than he would with a California team or a lot of the other East Coast teams. So I think he stays. Godwin, he'll probably hang around, but he would have to come at a discount. I think the Bucks would be silly to watch Baker walk. Now they're going to have to give him a pay increase, unless Baker says, "Hey, I'm good with 8.5 and returning 3 times that." But we'll see. So, he was a top 12 quarterback. So, Bob, there you go. Suck it.
Yeah. I mean, listen, dude, that's weird. Between the Austin Eckler outside the top 20 running backs and the Baker Mayfield call, it was a wild time. I do believe he'll be Geno Smith of next year, and he'll have a slight dip. But at least I feel like he built some competence. Even though Geno wasn't as good as he was last year, he's still a competent quarterback, and I'm all about more competent quarterback play. It's better for fantasy football. So I don't think Baker's going to just go turn into a pumpkin. But I think if you draft Baker Mayfield as a top 12 quarterback next year, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, and not to throw unnecessary shade at Baker, but I think just something when I was doing my research here and just kind of looking at overall rankings as I go through the offseason, something I'm remembering is that we had literally, guys, 20-plus quarterbacks miss at least 2 games. 20-plus missed at least 2 games, and 7 were done for the season. Right. So there was a lot of backup quarterbacks, a lot of quarterbacks that came in for a couple of weeks, a lot of quarterbacks that were dominant and then bailed. Guys getting signed off the streets. Joe Flacco, right, hasn't done anything in 5 years. He comes out, he's the best quarterback in football the last 6 weeks, right? I mean, that's probably just for Bob. But nonetheless, I mean, something to consider is that if we had those guys in a normal season, 80% of those guys stay healthy, maybe Baker's not standing out as much as he did. Nonetheless, that's what happened. These are the numbers. I'm not trying to change reality here, but it's just something to keep into perspective potentially for next year. Okay.
He was the QB20 in points per game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so but if you throw, but I'm not looking at it, Bob, but are you keeping guys in there like Kirk Cousins and Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson?
Minimum 8 games played. He would have been QB 19.
Use whatever stats you want, Bob. He finished as a top 12 quarterback.
That's listen, I already gave you the flowers there. He did finish his top 12, but like on a per game basis, he wasn't a difference maker for you.
He gave you flowers. He didn't apologize. It's not quite the same. I mean,
Yeah, I'm not gonna apologize. I'm not gonna do both. What are you fucking crazy?
For those of you Seinfeld heads, I mean, like an apology needs to be a specific terminology. Matt, quick question before I move on. What's your favorite flower?
I would say, because I put it at the feet of Bob, a black rose.
Oh, wow.
Rose. Nice.
Okay, fair
I
enough.
think,
I like
from my time in Europe, I think it's the tulip.
Tulips are very pretty. I like that. Yeah, I'm a lily guy myself, but we'll move on. All right, I'm going to talk about one of the exciting young wide receivers in the NFL, a guy that I was very excited about coming into the season. Drafted him everywhere at a discount. Didn't do anything until the season was over, and then became arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL during the playoffs. That's my boy Romeo Doubs. Now, that was Christian Watson came in, obviously exploded with Aaron Rodgers down the stretch last year. Makes sense. Caught all the touchdowns. I get it. Romeo Doubs was hurt during that time. Rodgers leaves. We have the offseason. During the offseason this year, there was immediate reports that Romeo Doubs and Jordan Love were besties. All right. And they were like neighbors in the house where Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford have breakfast. They were like the next room over eating brunch together as well. Then you had more injuries, and it just didn't come to fruition. Christian Watson becomes back healthy. You had the run game healthy. The Packers start slow. Jordan Love starts slow, what have you. Then all of a sudden they start picking up steam, and then Romeo Doubs gets hurt again. Then you see him during the back half of the season, and Romeo Doubs finally has a handful of weeks available. Now, of course, in my championship game, he let me down, unfortunately, but we're not going to dwell on that. Let's look at the positives here. He was fourth in the NFL with 8 touchdowns, so not quite double digits, but he did have 8 touchdowns. Jayden Reed also had 8 touchdowns, by the way, folks. Jayden Reed came out of nowhere, in my opinion. I didn't see him. Our resident Packer fan can let us know if we should have seen that coming. I didn't, because we were all focused on Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson. And Donald Driver, obviously, and some of the other greats there in Green Bay. But Jayden Reed outpaced across the board statistically. But when it came to the playoffs and when it came to crunch time, it was Romeo Doubs by a mile, and Jayden Reed was nowhere to be found. I mean, literally basically disappeared. 6 for 6, 151, and a touchdown in the first game for Romeo Doubs, which is he had a Packers playoff high with reception yards. And then in the next one, he was 8 for 83, or 4 for 83, excuse me, in the second game there versus the Niners. So a lot to be said, I think, for a player who had the hype coming in, sketchy midseason, but then finished strong as well. I know Christian Watson has the size and the athleticism. I know Jayden Reed's got the Debo effect, if you will, rushing the ball for fantasy points. But I think the true number one wide receiver for Jordan Love is Romeo Doubs. Now, I think you could be the number one wide receiver for a team and not necessarily for fantasy. If Jayden Reed stays healthy and he runs the ball the way that he does and catches the ball like this, he probably will have the most fantasy points there. And obviously Christian Watson has the touchdown upside, but I'm sticking with it. I had it early this season and it didn't come to fruition for about 15 weeks, but we're back at it. I'm going to claim Romeo Doubs is the number one wide receiver in Green Bay. It may be an overreaction because of the other auxiliary players there, but seeing him down the stretch when everybody else was healthy, game on the line, it was Romeo Doubs time and time again down the stretch. Matt, I'll turn back to you here as our resident Packer fan. Is Romeo Doubs the number one out there in Green Bay? Are they hoping Christian Watson gets back to 2022 form, or is Jayden Reed the new cat?
I think it's going to be week by week by week. And I think where you're going to make your money in drafting Green Bay Packers wide receivers is to figure out which one of the 3 you can get the latest in the draft. Watson is in discussions right now with team physicians to determine if he's going to just be healthy and get healthy, or if he's going to have surgery. My guess is that he should go get the surgery, but I'm certainly about as far from a doctor as you can get. I think that if the doc says go get that and you'll be better going into 24, then go do that. But
what is the sorry to cut you off, Matt, but what's the job title of a person who is as far as possible away from a doctor? What would be the job title?
The government employee.
All right, got it. Okay.
Which
Good.
I used to be that. I'm not that
Got it.
anymore. So actually,
Understood.
government contractor.
It's
which
classified.
is below government employee.
Classified. I like that.
I
It's
think
classified.
that it's going to be every other week. It's going to be just like it was with New England, like it was periodically with the 49ers, especially this year. And then you're going to get the Tampa, the Godwin Evans thing that you don't know who's going to be the guy each week. So to me, I think the discounted player is going to probably be Doubs, but I think he could finish the season as Green Bay's wide receiver 1. Watson still has name value. People remember 7 touchdowns in 3 games. And they know that Jaden Reed was this Swiss Army knife, Debo Light type guy. So I think you just be quiet about Doubs, go into your draft season. If Reed and Doubs go first, then you take Watson a couple rounds later. But I think that the one guy you're going to get some type of discount is going to be Doubs. If the draft happens tomorrow, you're not going to get a discount on Doubs. You're going to get a discount on Reed because he shit the bed in the playoffs, which seemed to be game script. I don't know. He just was not involved. Watson is still dinged. So I think you go with the guy you can get at a discount, and I think it will be Doubs when we get into the late summer and start to draft again.
Here's my overreaction to that.
Watch for the 2 tight ends in Green Bay.
If Doubs is the number 1 for Green Bay, then Green Bay next year will be Jacksonville of this year. If Doubs is the number 1, there's my take.
Like they're not even going to make the playoffs. Like Derek, we're trying to keep Matt on the program. Like that, what we're trying to do is go week to week with Matt involved.
Aaron Jones is a year older. Yeah, write that down, Matt. There's my prediction for the year. If Doubs is the number 1 in Green Bay, that's the prediction. Now, I mean, he reminds me of another former Packer that Matt will certainly have an affection for, and that's Randall Cobb. You remember Randall Cobb? He would get through the regular season. All of a sudden, he just shows up and blows up in the playoffs. Back when the Packers were in the playoffs. So that's what Doubs reminds me of this year. I mean, he only had 8. He had 8 games where he had 7 or less fantasy points, and he only had 2 games all season where he had double-digit targets. And so, certainly he had a couple good games in the playoffs. 12 targets, 10 receptions for 230 odd yards and a touchdown. I mean, those, obviously recency bias, we're going to think about that. But if you take his whole season under a microscope and look at it, there's really not a lot there to look at or to like. And Sky, you kind of mentioned that, living through the season, with Doubs on the roster, it was kind of painful. And, 2 games in the playoffs. I mean, if he can build that momentum and come out, on fire next year, then, that's great. But I don't think I'm in on that one.
Yes, Matt.
Okay, Derek, I love you. So this is hard for me, but remember what I said in my article, and I've said it to you guys offline, and we're going to be that organization that doesn't hide our secrets, right? So if people that we play with in leagues, if they want to follow our strategy, they can do that. I think we put everything in front of the paywall. Sky, you were 1 year early on Doubs. What did we agree? You want to be 1 year early versus 1 year late. So that tells me that next year is Doubs' year.
Ooh.
You know what? I think it's more about Jordan Love for me. He just looks legit. Like Jordan Love, when you watch him, you're like, okay, I want to invest in, because you're going to get these guys at discounts because none of them really blew up. The weirdest part is if you combine the stats of every other receiver in the playoffs, they're not even close to Romeo Doubs. He was an alpha. Like he legitimately helped them win a playoff game, which is impressive. But you're going to get a discount on these guys because what we're talking about right now is like, yeah, they didn't have the best seasons. No one had 1,000 yards. No one was even close. Jaden Reed was the emerging star. Maybe he hit a rookie wall. Doesn't show up in the playoffs. But what it really tells me is like, these are the kind of guys I want to take in the 8th, 9th, 10th round because I believe in their quarterback. I believe in the head coach. And I'm willing to take the upside play, because if they flop and they finish where they finished this year, I'm only going to probably have to spend an 8th, 9th, 10th round pick on these guys, and maybe even later for Doubs and stuff. So that's like the perfect pick for me, because if Jordan Love takes another step next year, these guys are going to they're going to crush their ADP. And speaking of Aaron Jones like is another one where if you watch those games, I don't even know how. I don't think it's out of the second round anymore, personally.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, Bobby. But let me just throw back at you. What young quarterback a year ago, right now, were we saying the same thing about?
Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
Brock Purdy.
But you also added in Calvin Ridley. Like, Calvin Ridley came in and he threw a wrench in that whole thing because he demanded more targets than Marvin Jones did, and you still had Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, and also the question is like, what is it, like Dontavian Wicks could be a problem, because Wicks, people are talking about him with his route running is elite. Then you got Reed, then you got Christian Watson, who has the pedigree. So there might be too many mouths to feed. I guess my point is like, that's what's going to hold their draft capital down. Like, none of us are going to probably know unless like the camp reports and the preseason pops off and one of these guys is emerging. But even still, we're going to get discounts on these guys. So I'm okay with missing if it ends up being like a timeshare or a committee. Maybe Matt's right. You take the latest. But after watching what Doubs did in the playoffs, I would love to do research on playoff production and see how it impacts fantasy football the next year, because he was like dominant. Like, it was, and every third down, like he wanted to go to Doubs. In the red zone, he goes to Doubs. So, I feel like I'm going to take a shot on that.
He trusts him, and that matters. Let's be clear here, folks. My overreaction is that Romeo Doubs is the number 1 wide receiver in Green Bay. Please don't read that as me saying he's a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football, right? Or that maybe he's the number 1 fantasy target or producer in Green Bay. There's a lot to go around. Musgrave didn't even play this year, right? So like, you have a lot of opportunity for these guys. What happens with AJ Dillon? Does Aaron Jones continue to, dominate with this team? So we'll see what happens there, but lots of upside for the Green Bay Football Packers. There's a lot of contention, a lot of, confusion with that call, but let's go to one here that I think we can all agree on. I don't think this is an overreaction. I just wanted to mention it here really quick before we get to Matt's takes. We just did our mock draft. We did round 1 and we did round 2 only. You can go onto YouTube, dial back a little bit in our podcast as well, and you can find those episodes. We did just round 1, and then we did another episode of just round 2. Coming up here in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a round 3 and 4 combined episode as well to round out our top 4 for a mock draft. Oddly enough, we didn't have any tight ends, and we barely had Josh Allen just to have the conversation, but he was our only quarterback. Then I went back through it, and I started kind of reconsidering and how I would do it if it was just my mock draft. I can't leave Sam Laporta out of the top 2 rounds. Like, he's going to be a second-round pick for me. He'll fall to the third-round pick if Mark Andrews comes back or whatever, even better. But if Sam Laporta creeps into the second round, that's the top 24 players. We already said that we were going to have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round. Boys, that means we have 3 Lions in the first 24 picks. I don't think there's a lot of contention on this. I just wanted to bring it up because Sam Laporta didn't make it into our top 24. But when I started rerunning numbers on my own mock draft and how he's bounced back from what I thought was a more severe injury, turned out not to be, thank goodness. But he has come back and he is already elite. He's still a rookie. Let's not forget about that. So we know that even Travis Kelce, it takes these guys usually a couple years to really get into the NFL shape as a tight end, as a blocker, and as a receiver. And Sam Laporta is already playing the part as a rookie. So obviously very impressive. We know Goff likes to use the tight end anyway. Remember his work with Tyler Higbee back in Los Angeles a couple years ago. So this is here to stay in this offense as well. So more of just kind of an observation. I don't know if it's an overreaction per se on this one, but does anyone disagree that we would have 3 Lions in the top 24 here? And oh, by the way, David Montgomery was running back 17. Jahmyr Gibbs is running back 10 in PPR. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 3, 12th in 20-plus yard plays, and he was one of 6 wide receivers with 10 touchdowns or more. Sam Laporta, tight end 1 overall. And then Kelce and Hawkinson had 14.5 PPR points per game, just a little bit more than Sam Laporta. He missed a game. I'm sorry, those two missed games, but Laporta had 8 games where he had 15 or more fantasy points. So he was on par with them there as well as a rookie. And of course, TJ Hawkinson, of course, have that big injury with the ACL. Travis Kelce getting injured or older, as we know, and Mark Andrews coming back from a injury as well. So we'll see what happens with the elite guys there. But for me, 3 Lions, and then David Montgomery might be a top 4-round pick there as well. Does anybody disagree with that take that we'll have 3 Lions in the top 24?
No, in fact, that was the only comment I was going to make, is that you need to include David Montgomery in that discussion, because he's going to be just outside the first couple rounds, and he's going to be a great value for someone. If you get him in the 4th round, like you suggest, that's going to be great value for a running back. So yeah, maybe then that 0 running back strategy in the first couple of rounds, and you get Montgomery to lead your backfield in round 4, you'd be in great shape.
Yeah, and when I did comparisons, because a lot of people are like, yeah, but David Montgomery missed a handful of games. Jahmyr Gibbs went off. That's true. When there was no Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs had 27 PPR points twice. That is absolutely true, and he went off in the playoffs. But when they played side by side, it was basically 50-50 the first half of the season. Second half of the season, it was Jahmyr Gibbs in touchdowns, opportunities, receptions, and big plays. So David Montgomery's not going anywhere. They're going to be 50-50 probably. Like it looks like in the playoffs, the last 2 games I've been watching closely, they're pretty much just running a drive each, right? And if a guy's getting 4 or 5 carries, then they'll swap him out for a play or something. But it's pretty much David Montgomery for a drive. That drive ends. Next drive, it's Gibbs. Next drive, it's Montgomery. So maybe that's just how they're going to do things. And then third downs goes to Gibbs with the receptions. But the explosion of Jahmyr Gibbs is not close. But just like Ingram and Alvin Kamara a few years on the Saints, both of those guys were top 10 in a potent offense. That could absolutely happen again this year if David Montgomery finishes out the season. So I like this one a lot here. Bob, thoughts?
The only biggest concern is Ben Johnson. Like if he leaves and goes to the Commanders right now, Mark Brunell is their QB coach.
Oh, shuts out lefty quarterbacks.
Yeah. Like and he has no play calling experience. I don't even know if he's the next guy up, but you got to remember though, the Lions kind of lucked into Ben Johnson. Dan Campbell didn't make Ben Johnson his OC. That wasn't his first pick. And then he became like the interim OC when things weren't really working. And then Ben Johnson became like this whiz kid out of the blue. So I am a little concerned that whoever the next guy is, what if he's not as creative or good with this offense? The other factor here is Jameson Williams. Like Williams has been a non-factor the first 2 seasons, but we started seeing a little bit of a glimpse in the second half. And if he emerges and starts demanding targets, is Jared Goff going to have the capacity to keep Gibbs, Montgomery, Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jameson Williams with a coordinator change? I'd just be a little concerned about that, but it's hard to really say these 3 guys are not close, at least close to top 24.
Yep, fair enough. And again, some of them have bigger upside than others. I'm not saying Sam Laporta is automatically going to return as the number 1 tight end, obviously. But again, if you're getting him there and you have that upside potential with a number 1 running back and wide receiver in your first couple of rounds, you have a great opportunity there. All right, let's move it on down here. Matty Styles, you got your first one here. We're talking about the Buffalo Football Bills. We kicked off the show talking about them and the disappointment, of course, unfortunately running into their kryptonite here with Patty Mahomes. But how are we feeling about next year? What's your overreaction in Buffalo?
I've been watching this guy for a couple of years. He's getting more and more opportunities. If Diggs continues to push the Keyshawn Johnson, Terrell Owens,
throw me the damn ball
window, and they move on from him, it's going to hurt Shakir. I think Diggs needs to be the one, or they need to ensure they have a one. But Shakir can take over the Buffalo number 2. I don't think Gabe Davis is the answer. Injury prone, and he just doesn't do it week in and week out. And I think that Shakir fits the mold of the dump off slot receiver, short catch guy that can be a wizard in PPR. So I like him. One of those guys you can get in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th round of your draft. And I want to be a year early on Shakir versus a year late.
So you would say that, so are you basically taking Gabe Davis more or less out of that and just talk like fantasy draft wise, you would just rather have Khalil Shakir than Gabe Davis, who still probably will get drafted in 7th, 8th, and you could probably get Shakir maybe in the 10th.
I will never roster Gabe Davis.
Well, Gabe Davis a free agent, so
Correct. Yeah.
that should. I don't see him coming back to Buffalo, frankly.
No.
I was thinking about this too. Like, Khalil Shakir is not your prototypical number one wide receiver necessarily, but we have a couple dominoes fall here over the next few months, gentlemen. He might be the number one on the roster for a week or two until they bring in Calvin Ridley or T. Higgins or something. But Khalil Shakir might just automatically be the number two or better based on default if they start losing a handful of these wide receivers.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing here was we kind of saw a glimpse in the second half where I think the biggest problem was that Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid, they were running a lot two more tight end sets, and it was hard for Shakir to get on the field consistently. Then the Dawson Knox injury happens, and we see a clear bump. He goes from like 30%, 4%, 3% to 65, 71, 76. And then it's like, okay, and then he has these better performances down the stretch. But the biggest thing was Gabe Davis got hurt over the last few weeks. And then he kind of like, all right, 31 yards and a touchdown isn't crazy good. But Pittsburgh game, they ran the ball a ton. And Josh Allen ran the ball a ton. But Kansas City, 7 for 44 and 1. And he actually outproduced Diggs over like the final 7 weeks. So, yes, this is a perfect – and listen, we've seen in the past Josh Allen support multiple fantasy-relevant receivers. So you know Josh Allen can do it. And I like the fact that he plays the slot. So even when they could put 3 receivers, he plays the middle of the field. We still call Beasley in PPR formats dominate with Josh Allen. So I do like that as well. So I'm in. I like this one.
Nice. Matt, quick question. Khalil Shakir or vintage Don Beebe?
We only have room for one helmet in the huddle, so I will take Shakir.
Fair enough.
Honestly, that hustle play, it will always go down in infamy. He's the one that tracked the guy and knocked the ball out, right?
Do you know the name of that guy, Bobby?
The guy who he stripped the ball from?
The Cowboys. Yeah.
I don't know who it was.
That's Leon Lett.
Leon Lett.
Big old Leon. Yeah, classic, man. Oh, man, Don Beebe was a savage. I love those old Bills teams. They don't get the rep because they lost the Super Bowls, but, man, Andre Reed and Thurman, they were fun. Good
Me and my
squads.
dad were talking about that today. Like the Bills now are kind of like not a Super Bowl version, but like a divisional round version of that Bills team where they keep losing right here every year. It's wild.
One of my favorite players growing up was Bryce Popp, middle linebacker for those guys. Was
former Green Bay Packer Bryce Popp.
Yes, sir. Dude was brutal. Great squad. Matt, let's tune into your second one here. You got another overreaction. We talked a little bit about, I brought it up early in the show. I'm not confident, unfortunately, right now, that the Browns are better next year with Deshaun Watson, assuming they just bring him back and ship out Joe Flacco. We'll see what happens, but they just subbed him back in. I'm not sure they're a better team than they were down the stretch.
Yeah, I will tell you. So I have a two-parter here for this for the Browns. I told you guys earlier, probably to some of your shock, that I'm not a doctor. I'm also not a lawyer or a judge. Therefore, I'm not going to comment on Deshaun Watson's off-field activities. I'll just say this. I'm not sure he's a good person. We'll leave it at that. And then when he did get on the field, he looked ass. He was terrible.
Which is the opposite of gas.
Yeah, not gas, ass.
No,
Bob, look it up. There's a difference. UrbanDictionary.com will give you the difference. I will say this. He did not appear as if he wanted to play in the NFL. The shoulder got to be to a point where he's like, yeah, I'm good, right? I'm kind of done. I've got this $230 million coming in, so I'm good. Again, when he played, we expected Deshaun Watson from, what was that, 3 years ago, where he was the number one player in fantasy football, and he was scrambling and running. He was involved, lots of touchdowns, throwing and rushing. And then he just, right, when he came back with all this baggage, which doesn't look good. I'm not a fan, right? I'm a girl dad. And so I don't dig what he's been accused of and settled out of court. With that, Flacco is squeaky clean, and they won football games with Flacco. And he was a hell of a fun ride while he was there. It was nice to see Flacco. It was nice to see Amari Cooper. I think even with Nick Chubb back, Flacco makes even more sense because play action would be absolutely fantastic for him. Another second to pass. He's got some folks blocking. I don't know if it'll be Kareem Hunt will be back or not, but I like possibly Chubb to be back, and then give me a little more Elijah Moore, the same Amari Cooper, and especially David Njoku, who made the leap into 23. So I'm all behind sending Watson on his way. You got to pay the bill one way or the other. Do you need the headache? Keep Flacco and let's roll.
Man, could you imagine just having $230 million coming your way regardless?
Wild.
Like unbelievable, dude. Once Will Fuller went down, Deshaun Watson hasn't been the same. That's all I'm saying.
Dead cap hits. $200 million this year. Dead cap.
Come on.
Wild. If they release him prior to 6-1, 200, all of it. $200 million dead cap. So like they are, if you look at the scenarios they outline on SpoTrack, right? Even if they trade him post 6-1, they still have a set. It's actually not too bad. So like the question is there any team out there? I don't think any team's going to want Deshaun. Even if you did like one of those trade a 7th for a 6 and Watson type deals, like, like a trade up. I don't even think you can get that because of the contract, right? And there's no reason for him to negotiate. I got paid. So you're stuck with Watson essentially for another season. But at this point, after watching what Joe Flacco did, Deshaun, if I'm that team, you don't double down on the mistake. It is what it is. You made a mistake. You paid the guy, but you made the playoffs without some of your better players. You can't just say, oh, well, we got to go back to Watson. I think you allow Watson to win the job back. You say, hey, we're bringing Joe in. Joe's going to be the QB1, but you guys are going to duke it out through training camp, and you better outplay Joe Flacco. And if you can't outplay him, then it is what it is. Because if you still make the play, like I doubt Flacco. How much money would you guys pay Flacco if you had to give him a contract?
Oh, $60 tops.
Okay. Well
he probably gets somewhere in the window of what they gave Baker, right? 6 to 12 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hate to throw shade on this because I actually agree with you, but here's, besides the money, here's one stat that doesn't count for fantasy, but it counts for the NFL, and it's team record. What was Joe Flacco? What was the Cleveland Browns record with Joe Flacco at starting quarterback? Anyone guess?
How many games did he play? He played like 6 or 8, right?
6 games.
4-2.
Let's go. 4-2.
Yeah. Deshaun Watson played 6 games as well. What was his record?
4-5.
5-1.
What? That doesn't even make sense.
5-1.
But how many points did they score in those games? I would love to know the offensive stats of those games.
Well, they also had Nick Chubb too. Like, it's really hard. Look, we're not GMs.
Nick
believe
Chubb
it or not.
Week 2.
Yeah. It's true, huh? Man, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Obviously, they're stuck with them. The only teams I could possibly imagine would consider it who aren't going to, but would be Washington or Atlanta because they have so much money and they need a quarterback and they just need the athleticism and a shakeup, whatever. But I don't see that happening at all. So, Joe Flacco, again, the overreaction is that the Browns should make Joe Flacco the QB1 for 2024. And I think the overreaction is only because Deshaun Watson has the auto start because of this money. But performance-wise, and Derek, I appreciate you bringing some reality to our reality television show here. 5-1 does matter to the Browns, no matter who's doing it. Right. But if I'm just going eyeball test, I can't remember a single game, and there weren't many this year, where I watched Deshaun Watson or looked at fantasy stats or whatever and was like, man, that's Houston, Deshaun Watson, Clemson, Deshaun Watson, who I wanted the Niners to draft in 2017, and I was busted up when we didn't get him. And then he hasn't returned to form, but he's getting W's. And that the defense was much better back then. We'll, whatever the case may be, but you're right. Maybe that plays into performance. And Joe Flacco, look, he's fun, and I'm not going to say he lost the game for the Browns against Houston. Houston just outplayed him. But down the stretch, he threw 3 consecutive picks, 2 were to the house. It got ugly quick. And unfortunately, that's kind of the knock. He's got that Jay Cutler in him, where like he's gonna kind of YOLO ball it, and when it works, it looks fun and it's awesome. But when it doesn't, it can cost your team the ball game.
I don't know. It just looks better. Like it just sometimes like just watching the Browns offense like as a whole, it just looked better. It like smoother. Amari Cooper, David Njoku. I get it. Deshaun Watson. I'm not saying you just give the ball. You can't just go into the offseason with Watson as your only option. I think if Flacco played his way, he had 800 more yards passing in the same amount of games. He had double the touchdowns in the same amount of games. Like it. No, I'm sorry. Double the touchdowns, 14-7. It's just clear as day. But the other thing is, like, Watson is going through a lot of mental stuff. Like, that whole situation probably screwed with him to get back to neutral. This is probably his first full year of doing that. So I just think you got to have both. I would like that's for me because I'm probably not going to want to draft Njoku and Cooper next year if they go Watson. Personally, are you guys going to be? Because I feel like you're going to have to draft them at their Flacco peak, if you will. I'm not going to do that. Are any of you guys?
No, I agree. There's definitely a downside there. So before they brought Flacco off the couch, when's the last time the Cleveland Browns made a good quarterback decision?
Brian Sipe.
Free agency. When is the last time they've done that?
Brian Sipe.
I really enjoyed the I think it was 2013 maybe, but Derek Anderson had a fun season.
2008, baby. Let's go.
Was that it? 2008?
Yeah.
Okay.
Derek
Anderson had a fun year.
15 years ago is what you're saying.
Okay. Hey, within the last 20, that's that's a kid going to kindergarten, right? They're just getting into high school. That's it's not bad.
07, my apologies. 07.
Even further back. Okay, 16 years ago.
Derek
Anderson was that was my jam.
My
RG3 had a few snaps too. I'm sure that was entertaining.
I'm so sick of RG3. Get off my TV. What a bum.
Braylon Edwards was like dominant.
I
gotta tell you, Rob Chudzinski is one of my like weird. I love coaches. If you know Chud, he was Cam Newton's OC in Carolina for a while. The guy is awesome. He goes to the Cleveland Browns of all places, and that's Derek Anderson's huge year. And then he gets fired, and then he never gets a job again. I'm like, what is going on?
Bring him on the pod, Bob.
I love it. I'm in.
Give him a chance. All right, let's move on here. We got two more here from the boss. Both of them from Kansas City, who shouldn't be in the playoffs still, but the script is the script, so we move on here. Bob, what are a couple overreactions in Kansas City?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna actually just put them together because I'm all in. Like after watching Isiah Pacheco, Rashee Rice over the last few weeks, like Pacheco especially too. Like I know Rice is gonna get that second year wide receiver 1 for Patrick Mahomes bump. I think he's a top 24 pick locked in, especially after what we saw down the stretch. But Isiah Pacheco, I feel like a lot of people are not going to give the same respect to. And I think we're overlooking the fact that CEH is an undrafted free, UDFA, or not UDFA, unrestricted free agent, my apologies. And Jerick McKinnon is just like 34 years old now. And they started trusting him on third downs, and they started giving him more of the complete three down role. And like prior to the CEH debacle, Kareem Hunt was a 3-down back in this offense and was absolutely dominant for fantasy football, top 5 upside. And I think you can get that with Isiah Pacheco. I'm literally outside of an injury or something crazy happening in the free agency. I'm going to be targeting both these guys extremely high next year because they're worth Patrick Mahomes. And I think they both could be top 10 at their positions easy. And that's why I'm going to have them both in my top 24. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, I tend to agree. Rashee Rice is one of the more impressive rookies this year, and he's just going to grow. And I really think, you get below Rice in that wide receiver depth chart, and it gets ugly fast. So I really think Kansas City is going to bring in another, wide receiver, whether it's a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, to complement Rice. And I think they're going to be really stout there, because Kelsey's getting older. So they need to, start thinking of what this team's going to look like in the next couple of years. But Pacheco as well. Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's going to be a really prominent running back, both NFL and in fantasy. The one thing I'm a little disappointed with, though, in the playoffs, 2 targets. Like 2 targets and 2 receptions. I mean, he was running the ball like a beast, but only 2 receptions and on 2 targets in the playoffs. So that was a little disappointing. You really, for fantasy, we'd really like to see him take on a role like Kamara or Jahmyr Gibbs, because I think he has the skill set for it. Rachaad White, has the skill set for that, but we didn't really see that when he got the dominant running role. So if we can get that element brought back in, give him the 3 down back, catching the balls out of the backfield, he's going to be a beast next year.
Back to my theory, not a year late, better to be a year early. Pacheco, you were a year early. Rashee Rice, you were a year early. And Rachaad White, you were a year early. That means all 3 have to be priorities in 2024. You can set up a team with those 3 and then just open up the draft for me, right? Because you're going to get them in rounds. Probably you could get all 3 of those guys in round 2, 3, 4. So you still have a first-round pick to burn. And it could be, say you draft at number 5. You could get Amon-Ra St. Brown, have Rice, Pacheco, and White. There's your top 4. What are you going to do next besides win your league?
Boom. There's not a lot of good free agent. I just can't imagine like a T. Higgins type, them getting Mike Evans or T. Higgins, because I don't know if they're going to be able to swing it. But there really isn't you would just imagine. I'm tired of Justin Watson. I want to say is a good player, but how much Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Justin Watson do we freaking need to see on the field? They're on the field all the time, and they don't do anything. It's wild, except for one play every 3 weeks. They catch a long 50-yard pass or something.
Justin Ross, maybe.
Let's go. Damn it. No, Justin Ross is he's one of these, he can't get out of his own way. Yeah, and this kid's bother me, dude. I was so stoked on him coming out of college. Let me throw something at you, Bob. You brought it up. I'm gonna wing it by you guys here, and we'll get out of here. So everybody knows about T. Higgins. Everybody knows about Mike Evans. Those are the big kind of free agent names. There are a number of other names here, right? Michael Pittman Jr. from the Colts. Let me just throw a bunch of names at you, and I'm going to see if any of these make sense. Mike Evans, T. Higgins, and Mike Pittman Jr. Marquise Brown, once a good wide receiver. Calvin Ridley, Darnell Mooney, also once a good wide receiver before they mix things up with the Bears. Gabe Davis, who we mentioned earlier. Odell Beckham, over the hill. Tyler Boyd, a once love affair for Bob. And then Curtis Samuel and Kendrick Bourne and some deeper guys. But for me, there's a couple. We brought up Stephon Diggs because it's kind of we all think that they're grumpy in Buffalo, which I think they are. We'll see what happens. In NFL terms, though, I can't imagine T. Higgins or Stephon Diggs specifically having any chance to land in Kansas City because they're the number 1 competitor. Why would you send one of your best players to your competitor? That makes no sense to me. But Mike Evans, who I think stays in Tampa, but Mike Evans could go, or Michael Pittman could go as well. Michael Pittman ends up in Kansas City. That one makes sense to me. That could be great. And then maybe it just helps a guy like Rashee Rice, excuse me, as the number 2. Maybe some of these guys are better number 2s than number 1s there. So we'll see what happens. But do any of those names pop out to you guys as a possible free agent? I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because, of course, we could talk about nothing for another hour. We'll have plenty of free agent prediction episodes. But while we're talking about the Chiefs and what Rashee Rice might fall into next year, do any of those potential wide receivers pop off? Not to mention what they might do in the draft.
Yeah, for me, that name is Pittman. You just mentioned. I think he's gonna be a highly sought after free agent, and he fits really well on a lot of teams. Kansas City being one of them. So yeah, I'll be really interested to see where he goes. I agree with you, Sky. I think Evans is going to go back to Tampa. So I think that's kind of just a name, free agent name, in spirit. But yeah, Michael Pittman is going to be the name that I'm going to really track to see where he goes. I think that's going to be a difference maker.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's a healthy Kadarius Toney can make a difference, but he's got to stay healthy because Mahomes can make him a very viable wide receiver 2 or 3. I think Valdez-Scantling's on the last year of his 3-year, $30 million deal or $33 million deal. Gross. He got significantly overpaid after leaving Green Bay. McCole Hardman is trash. If the Jets let you go in a year when they don't have any wide receivers except Garrett Wilson, you're trash. That meant he was below both Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb on the depth chart, and Gibson. I don't even remember his first name. So he was, wide receiver 5 or 6. I think if they can get Tony healthy and he and Mahomes can come together and have some type of networking where they get on the same page, Tony is the reason they won't sign a wide receiver. But again, they've got guys like Creed Humphrey and Joe Tooney that they're going to have to pay. So they're going to have to go bargain binning for skill position players.
Well, and L'Jarius Sneed, their all-pro, defender cornerback is also needing to get paid. I mean, he's probably going to walk as well, which is huge. Like they have to he shut down all the number ones this year. And I mean, they had a good defense overall, Chris Jones, whatever, like Chris Jones, but that back end secondary was elite because of him. They have to bring him back as well. So that's not a fantasy thing. But Matt, you bring up a good point. You got to pay all your guys, obviously, and their best player on the team is Harrison Butker. So they got to make sure they retain him there as well. I just feel like Kadarius Toney's the type of guy that the New York Giants could use.
Shut up. I honestly, as soon as you said Kadarius Toney, I was like, get the hell out of here with this shit. The thing with the Chiefs is like, after they let Tyreek Hill walk, I can't imagine them going splurging on T. Higgins or Pittman. But the question is like, it just seems like over the years, like they've gone after these veteran-ish kind of guys. Like the question is, would you guys rather?
What the hell happened to Juju?
Exactly. Like, is the question for me is like, would you rather have good players who just haven't played with the elite quarterback? Like, imagine Kendrick Bourne with Patrick Mahomes. Imagine guys like
KJ Osborne as well. He's a deeper one.
KJ Osborne, DJ Chark.
Reynolds.
Like these guys who are, have shown a little flashes, but they're maybe not DJ Chark, but I would say like KJ Osborne, Noah Brown flashed a little bit. These guys who have, when they play with better quarterbacks, could be fantasy assets. Or do they swing for the fences and go with a guy like Chase Claypool, who has all the talent in the world, still young, and you could just say, here's Patrick Mahomes, go show your talent. Or guys like like a DJ Chark. Like I just don't know what direction they can go in here. Like what direction? It just seems to me like they want to bring in like stabilizing guys, like MVS, like a steady hand, even though they haven't been. Like to be honest with you, MVS has been terrible for them, dropping touchdown passes.
Horrible.
But so I guess even like I would love to see a guy like DJ Chark land there and just like take that talent and see what he could do. Just
be a veteran dude. Yeah. I mean, honestly, even a guy like Adam Thielen or something, just be a chain mover, I think would be nice. I just wish I could see Dwayne Bowe play on this Chiefs team. That's all I want to see.
Wow. Oh, wow. Things got emotional. Like a Darnell Mooney is even a nice player.
I like Darnell Mooney a lot. He got hurt and he got kicked to the curb with DJ Moore, which makes sense. But yeah, there's a lot of these auxiliary guys that Mahomes could use. And obviously Mahomes can probably make anybody better than maybe they are. But if you're already good and you're not dropping passes, then he's going to make you elite. And as we can see, Aaron Rodgers got about 6 dudes paid who shouldn't have been paid because he's so elite. So the quarterback matters so much there.
But does it matter anymore? Because Rashee Rice is now the guy, right? You got Kelsey.
Yeah, but you need other guys though.
No, I understand you need other guys, but the other guys are more like, hey, we're going to take a deep shot here. We need a guy for a couple, short passes here and there. But like they have their 2 linchpins now. If Rice is the one wide receiver, Kelsey has another elite year out of him. Your number 3, you can kind of cobble together an MVS game here and there, a Justin Watson deep catch here and there, a Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman type yards after the catch guy here and there. Do you think they're going to go after a better player? I would like for them to do that, but
I totally feel like a guy like Josh Reynolds is just a good clubhouse guy and he gets it done wherever he is. They had DeMarcus Robinson, who now is doing well with the Rams, but he was that third guy nobody paid attention to with Tyreek and Kelsey, and he was excellent when they went to him. They don't have a reliable second, third guy right now outside of Kelsey and Rice, and I think that's going to be a problem moving forward after this season, but we shall see. One more time, we got all of our overreactions here based on the NFL playoffs so far. Chris Godwin won't regain form in 2024. Mike Evans will be back as a wide receiver 1 conversation. Baker Mayfield will be a quarterback 1 next season. Romeo Doubs is the number 1 wide receiver in Green Bay. The Lions have not 1, not 2, but 3 top 24 players in next year's fantasy football draft. Khalil Shakir could emerge as the wide receiver 2, if not 3 in Buffalo. The Browns should stick with Joe Flacco and make him the QB1 for Deshaun Watson to battle with versus the other way around. Isiah Pacheco will be the running back 1 in 2024, top 12 option there for fantasy football. And Rashee Rice will be a wide receiver 1 as well next season also. A lot of overreactions this time of year, folks. Enjoy the final 1, 2, 3 games of the NFL season before the fake All-Star game they try to pone off as an actual entertainment. After, Sean Taylor destroyed a punter, they pretty much took hitting out of it. And after that, it hasn't been much of a game since. But we have the AFC and the NFC championship games coming up. Gentlemen, quickly on air, we didn't do picks last week. Let me just recap how we did and how we're doing. Bob Lamarco, 4-0. Niners, Ravens, Lions, and Chiefs. The rest of us went with the 3, but we picked the Bills, which is the L, and Derek went with the Texans over the Ravens. I almost did the same, but I stuck with the Ravens. Matt and I go 3-1. Derek went 2-2. So far we have Matt Stiles leading the pack at 7-3 overall. He's got that Packers upset, which is the difference so far over the Cowboys a few weeks ago. And the rest of us are 6-4 exactly. We're going to get our picks in right now here. Bob, I'm going to start with you. Lions, Niners, NFC Championship.
Niners.
Derek, Lions, Niners, NFC Championship.
Lions.
Lions going with the upset. Maddie?
Niners.
I'm going to go with the Niners as well, contractually obligated. Let's go with the Chiefs, AFC Championship. Bob, who you got? Chiefs, Ravens.
I've been saying Ravens all this whole entire time. But I feel like the Chiefs are going to win it. But I'm going to stick with my four. I said prior to the postseason start, I said 49ers, Ravens. So I'm going to stick with it. Ravens.
Well, that's what the script says so far. So we'll stick with that. Derek?
Ravens.
Maddie?
Ravens.
Ravens as well. So it looks like everybody's got the Ravens, and the 3 of us have the Niners. Derek is going to go with the Lions. We shall see what happens in the NFC and AFC championship games. Of course, the winners of these games meet in the Super Bowl. And if it's the Ravens and the 49ers, the NFL is going to have some explaining to do. But we will bring that back to you next Tuesday on another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Quad Box. Bob, go ahead and run us out, buddy.
No, I'm not running us out. We're done. We're out of here. Thanks for everybody joining. Derek Favre, go follow him. Matthew Stiles, Sky Gawasco, Bobby Lamarco. It's an hour 17. If you're still here, God bless you. We love you. We'll see you soon. Take it easy.